The gravity of the time is such that every new avenue of peace, no matter how dimly discernible, should be explored. Never before in history has so much hope for so many people been gathered together in a single organization. You will provide a great share of the wisdom, of the courage, and the faith which can bring to this world lasting peace for all nations and happiness and well-being for all men.
Welcome back, everybody. This is another episode of Titans of Nuclear. My name is Ryan Howell, and I have the privilege today of speaking with Dr. Sharmistha, and I'm going to let you pronounce your last name. So
Mukhopadhyay.
Mukhopadhyay, yes. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so our listeners always like to hear where you've come from and what your background is. So tell us a little bit about where you grew up and talk to us about that journey of getting, towards nuclear.
Okay, so I grew up in India in a city called Calcutta. Now it's called Kolkata. That's where the British had their
That's
capital.
The north of India, right?
It's east of
East
India.
of India,
It's
okay.
east of India. That's where the East India Company was made and where the British, and so that's the history of the place. I grew up there. I did my master's from Calcutta, and then I moved to US due to family reason. My husband moved, and somehow I came to University of Kentucky, where my husband was doing a postdoc. And the easiest thing, and in between, after my master's and before I came to US, I was teaching high school in India, which is one of the most exciting jobs I've had. Although I'm talking about 25 years back, because high school India, teaching physics in high school India, it's a big challenge, because that's where you solve most of the Resnick Halliday problems, and teaching Resnick Halliday to 17-year-old kids was not a very easy job, but to make problems look simpler and to get it across them, that was a big challenge, I felt. So after that I came to Kentucky, and then I wanted to be a school teacher, high school teacher, but then I realized in US to become a high school teacher is a challenge. You have to get a lot of certification, this, that, and I didn't have the patience for that. Rather, everybody at the university, they were telling me, why don't you join the Ph.D. degree, which I didn't want to. Because I always felt that was more difficult and it's time consuming, but that was the more easier thing to do. So I just went into I started my PhD. My daughter was 1 year old, so I started doing my PhD with her, and it looked easy because, of course, it was the coursework and everything went on pretty smoothly. It was more or less repetition of what I did in my master's. So when I saw almost everybody struggling because of the a lot of mathematics that you need, which I already had it, so that made my life easy. And then I had to choose my project, my PhD project.
Right.
I didn't have much option. Sad to hear, but I'm talking about 2005, quite some time back, and most of the faculties refused to take me because I already had a child. So without an option, I spoke with my supervisor, Dr. Steve Yates at Kentucky, and he was happy to accept me in the nuclear field, and we had an accelerator there. University of Kentucky Accelerator Laboratory. We have a Van de Graaff generator. We do most of the experiments there, measurements there, but most of the experiments are long run, 24 hours for 30 days we run, but we have shifts, and it's a challenging thing, but he was happy to include me in the group, and that is how I started my journey into nuclear physics. So I was mainly doing inelastic neutron scattering and looking into gamma rays and studying the structure of the nucleus, which is very different than what type of work I do here. But after that, I moved to the industry. And so after completing my PhD, 4.5 years, because I was lucky because all my projects were on campus. So I didn't have to wait for any beam time or running around. And some of the projects was challenging, but we got to understand the physics, what we wanted to know for the time being. But then physics changed later. So then I moved to industry.
Right. And that's what landed you at Sun Nuclear?
No, that's where landed me in Boston.
Okay.
So 2008 to 2011, I was in the scintillator company called Radiation Monitoring Devices.
And what was your role there?
So I was, of course, a scientist, and that was one of the very exciting things I was doing. Right now, it's a big, you have the detector off the shelf, but that was the time I was developing the prototype neutron gamma scintillator, which nobody had heard of before.
Right.
And that's now in the alpha-solenoid scintillators, which are very much now in the market. CLLB, cesium, lithium, lanthanum bromide, cesium, lithium, lanthanum chloride, and huge families. But I was the first one, almost the first one, to test and make detectors out of 1 millimeter scintillator, which is now has grown to I think 1 inch or even 2 inches.
Oh wow!
So,
yeah.
So I was almost the first few to work with those prototype scintillators and that was the first scintillator which did that neutron gamma discrimination. Plus we had the thermal neutron gamma equivalent energy peak around 3 MeV, which made a marvelous detector to detect thermal neutron, even if you didn't want to do an N gamma pulse shape discrimination and all those complicated things. So you can make it work simple, and you can make it work, and you can also get it work in a more realistic way. So that was one of the projects, apart from other garnets and scintillators that I worked.
Very good. And what changes when you go from 1 millimeter out to an inch, which
oh
is
my
25
God,
millimeters?
it's huge. So of course I was doing the detection part, and I was not the real person to grow the scintillator, where all the challenge, I'm sure they must have had sleepless nights. So it's basically the light collection as you
so
grow.
it makes it more sensitive?
Very difficult. Your lights get trapped within the scintillator. All you want from a scintillator is a big light output. That's the thing that because the light output goes, noise increases, you don't get to see what you want to see, and that's a big challenge to so that the light don't reflects out in one surface and doesn't get lost from the other. So that's one of the biggest challenge.
Sure.
So the way we used to do is, when I will do the testing and the measurement, and we will talk with the detector developer, and they will see what's happening, and then they'll go back, grow another scintillator, come back, and this is how we would talk.
Yeah.
And of course the recipes are secret.
Sure. But that iterative process, that's very
That's
good.
the process.
So maybe for our listeners who don't know what a scintillator is, can you talk a little bit about what that exact technology is and how that works?
Very simple. Yeah, it's simple. Scintillator, something scintillates, gives out light. If there is an interaction, whatever may be the interaction, for us the interaction are all the ionizing radiation that we were looking into, mainly the neutrons and the gammas. Those are the radiation. The scintillator was mainly to detect those radiation, but there are other scintillators for other radiation. So when these radiation is incident on the sample, which is, we call it a scintillator.
The material.
The material. Some chemistry happens, complicated. There is some jumping of electrons here and there, which gives out some light, and the amount of light we get is directly proportional to the energy of the incident radiation that was falling onto the scintillator.
And that's what the electronics can then interpret as the spectrum of the radiation.
Of the radiation, yes. But then again, there are more other things happening, but this is just a simple way to explain what the scintillators are. And so the main objective is to get as much light as you want to collect out of the scintillator. But again, that is not the end. That light has to fall into some of the electronics, which is usually a photomultiplier tube or other solid state electronic tube called solid state photomultiplier tube, whichever way, to get the electrons out and then try to extrapolate what we got and what was incident on our main detector. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's how a scintillator works in a nutshell.
That's great. Yeah. So that was your work up in Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts.
How did you end up in Florida? What did that
Oh
transition
no,
look
then
like?
in between there was a long story.
Okay,
I'm moving around all over the world.
There you
Okay, so after that I had some family things, so I moved back to India.
All right.
And there I was a professor, and I was a head of the department of engineering college, and where I was basically designing courses, teaching students, and I was in charge of 40 about faculties who were working under me, and there were 500 students, and almost I knew knew 50% of the students by name because I used to interact quite a lot with them to understand their background and things. So that was the 4 years, and then I realized, within a couple of years, within the 4 years, that I'm going away from research every day, and I couldn't get any interesting projects out there, and that made me come back to US, back to Kentucky, and then I was working with some interesting neutronless beta decay project, more physics oriented, and luckily good work happened, and then I moved to Florida.
Okay.
So it's a long way.
Yes, roundabout. Well, it's good that you're back in the States. So
yes.
then you worked for Sun Nuclear for a little while.
Yes.
And that was still in the detector side?
So it was, the Sun Nuclear, it's a medical physics company now. Mirion has bought it, so after I left. And so they have these different detectors to basically get to analyze the beam, right. From the CLINAC. That time it was mainly CLINAC. But the instrument that was there to detect, so my project was mainly to see how much radiation damage it's getting from the measurement. So so it was not directly building up a detector, but again working on some type of instrument which has radiation falling on it and seeing the thing on it. Yes.
So that's radiation monitoring, right?
More like radiation monitoring.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the role of radiation monitoring in these advanced nuclear technologies?
So those detectors, especially the water phantom, they are the other detectors. That is mainly for detecting, the photons and the X-rays, or an other reaction channel that opens on high energy. So. There are some motors and electronics which are driving things around. So I want my some of the theoretical work and experiment was to find out how much dose those areas were getting.
Okay.
And which will not damage, so that once we make an instrument and we put it out in the market, it should be there for, say 15 years or 20 years without any radiation damage.
Okay, so you were working on the service life of the detector.
Yes, more on the service life of the detector, which is very different.
So radiation damage to materials. Have you had much background in materials before?
No, but it's a big collaboration, right? So, nobody, it's not me. So there was another person, who would do a lot of simulation, and then I would go to the lab and do the measurement of how much really radiation we are getting, and then extrapolate to some other, we will not do all the experiment, but just to see where we are, what we were getting and what we do expect to get from a year around, or 10 years or 20 years down the line.
Very good.
Yeah. So that's different.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah.
So how did you land here at Georgia Tech? Was there anything in between Sun Nuclear?
No. Okay. I think it was. Yeah, Georgia Tech. So this, this is very frankly, this is almost like my dream job, because if you look into my history, it's mainly I like industry, in R&D in industry. I really like. It's very upbeat, and you get to see things which nobody has seen before, and you're working on that before it comes out in the market.
Right.
And it's your child.
Right. But you also seem to have a passion for students.
I have a passion for students, but I think more for R&D. I definitely like to develop something. I am the one who is seeing, or my team is the one who is seeing, right? So that's true. So then, and not too much, doing the academic job. I like teaching, but not so much of bookkeeping, which is now. So that's the thing. But then I felt this job was almost a balance between, I have academic environment around me with hopefully some industrial overlap, and for my industrial background I can always bring things here, so that's always an open. And of course my favorite neutrons are there here too, so I can work with them, work with neutrons, and with different projects, work with some of the academic projects which are again in industry. That's missing, because in industry they have a goal and they are focused on that. Academics, you have variety of projects.
Sure.
So as also those are, pretty much the first time, although the real R&D, the real research and development again starts from here. So that was the reason I felt, okay, this job is pretty much a balance, and I can teach if I want to a little bit, and and interact with students, because young minds keep you always very
that's
young.
great. Yeah, industry definitely takes your broad and makes you very focused and narrow, and you get to kind of come the other way where you've got industry experience and get to expand that to all the students.
Yes.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and
So-
also help students, because I've seen the other side.
Right.
A little bit more than.
Can talk from the real world side.
Yes, real world. But fortunately, the industries I have worked and the people I have worked, they have given me a lot of freedom to do a lot more research than just do this. So I had that, a little bit freedom to go a little bit off the way and to explore some other things, even if it was not focused just on the proposal of things.
Right.
So, yeah.
No, that's great. So talk to us about your fascination with neutrons and what you like to do with them here.
Okay, so the neutrons, the interesting thing, of course, neutrons, the interaction of neutrons is very interesting, because unlike the other radiation, of course, photons are also chargeless, neutrons do not have charge, but the way they interact with the material doesn't only depend on the density. Of course, it doesn't depend, different type of scattering, or finally the inelastic, or if each material, some of the material, the way it interacts is different, and then thermal interacts and fast neutrons. So there is a whole range of things. So really, I'm fascinated with detection, like how to detect neutrons,
right.
and that's where I've done on some of the development. But those are mainly for thermal neutrons. But at Georgia Tech, you have the enormous number of instruments to do not only the thermal neutrons but also the other neutrons, epithermal and the fast neutrons,
right.
and we have different neutron generators. We have neutron sources, and pick up a range that neutron is available, which is absolutely fascinating. So most of my work goes in, doing the instrumentation part, because some of these detectors are very old, and you won't believe even when we call these people to say that we need a servicing, they do not believe that they had made those instruments, like 30 years old or 20, but they work fabulously, because the neutron characters have not changed.
Yep, that company didn't, but the company that they bought did.
Exactly,
so, yes,
exactly. Yeah.
I've been there before, buying parts off of eBay to try and keep stuff going.
Yes, and even the label, on the label they have the phone number, and you'll see that there have been already 3 hand changed since the time they have sold you that detector. So so that's something, so the interesting part here is there are many detectors, and most of the time my work goes in getting the field characterized, like even if the neutron source, what dose it's getting, at what distance, and what dose we would have got if human tissue was there, and how can we mimic some of the situation, like for example when you're going to space, there are a lot of radiation around. Now, do we go up and do all the measurements there? That's not possible, so we do some simulation, and then with our sources we try to reproduce that type of an environment to get a similar dose rate, and then we bring our detectors and other instruments just to check whether we are getting it, and then expose our interest in the material we are interested to see the effect of those. So that's something which I have not again worked before. So to characterize the neutron field, which is I think very, very fascinating.
Are there any long-going studies that you guys have partnerships with that you can talk about?
We have long projects with so we have this facility called Radiological Science and Engineering Lab at Georgia Tech, and
which you're the manager
which
for,
I am the manager for, and that's basically we serve, you cannot keep sources everywhere, so this is most of the place where all the sources are kept. We have the access to all the sources, and this is where I work with different other people all around Georgia, like other department at Georgia Tech who are developing different detectors. We have projects with Emory, with trying to understand the effect of these radiation on the DNAs. Okay, so that's an ongoing project, and I'm sure that will be a pretty long project. And we are going step by step to understand what's the effect of these radiation on these. First we understand what the radiation is. We try to characterize the field, and then we make it incident to some of the cells. We have done one phase 0 work, and the results are out, but we have some other ideas in mind, and we are working mainly with Emory for this cell projects, and there are other different projects, and mainly we work. Most of my projects are overlapping in testing new scintillators or new detectors that students are developing to see the response.
So is this like marrying the sciences and the humanities together?
Yeah, yes, that's, nowadays things we have to bring all together, right? Because the biology, I think that was always the thing, that they didn't have access to these type of radiation and resources. But now with the medical physics system, right, with the CLINAC and the flash theory and things coming up with high radiation things, so now these are getting more merged together, and we have the capability to produce those fields somewhere here at Georgia Tech. So we are trying to mimic those other radiation environment and see what the experimental results come out to be.
Yeah, that's great.
Apart from doing the simulation, which is there always.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what new projects or future projects are you going to be working on soon that you're excited about?
Yeah, so mainly the future projects, of course, the moment we get a new instrument, and one of the project that we have to get this, there's a new detector out there called Advocam Time Pix, like it's a hybrid semiconductor detector. So and we should be getting one free module very soon just to check it out. I'm excited about that instrument because that can do a lot of dose measurement, linear energy transfer, and all those things that are, we are doing with different detectors. First, to understand how the detector works and to check all our measurements that we have done, and then to go from there and beyond, like bringing them into the class laboratories. And this is one of my I'm really interested to get these new detectors which are there in the market, to bring it into the lab course. Already we have some fascinating new digitizers and everything in the lab modules, but incorporate them into the curriculum.
Yeah, so as we bring all these detector technologies into the 21st century, where we're going all digital, we're going from these analog things where it was a lot of hardware that is actually physically changing dials and knobs and you can see things on the scale, and now we're going to digital. Have you seen any pushback from the industry or from radiation protection side on like trusting those technologies that are now just codes and softwares analyzing these?
I have not worked exactly on that part, but I personally do a double check. Okay. No matter, because the good thing about digitizers, they are fascinating, and lab classes excellent, but sometimes when we are doing some detailed work, just to understand, because the digitizers are programmed by someone and they have the limitations which we do not know.
Right.
Only the company knows. I knew the detectors I developed because I had also had done those things, but then when we go and sell it, we do not tell all the things. We there's no point telling those information. So always whatever we do, we definitely take a signal and put it to the oscilloscope. Maybe I do it because I'm from the old school and I don't know how long people will continue to do that.
You have to pass that along.
Yes, and of course every digitizers do have their waveform that you can see, which I really do not know how they do it. There is some signal processing they do even before you get to see the waveform on the digitizers. So first step is still the analog part, and looking into the scope trace, and if we are happy, then I do the rest of the processing. And sometimes we do comparison of, I do it with some analog electronics with the NIM modules. I just try to get because I'm used to it, and then move to digital using digitizers.
Very good.
Yeah, that's why let's see when we get these new instruments how those results match with all the old detectors and system we have. So that's something probably.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so as the nuclear industry seems to be kind of booming right now, and we're talking about thousands of new reactor types and thousands of different plants coming online, how do you see these instruments and detectors kind of marrying in with that and being kind of baked into the solution?
Yes, in a good way, these are small detectors, and so it's easy to keep it anywhere. But but we have to check how much radiation damage it will be done. So that's not that I know of. But I think it's a very portable and convenient, and you can take all the data outside, so you can always constantly monitor, compared to probably the old ones that was there. Like they were bulky, and you have to always have those long cables, and and all the data doesn't get recorded. But I think with this definitely it will help to monitor the doses, for places probably where it was not easy to access, because these are very small, say 1.5 centimeter by 1.5 centimeter. That's a sensor.
Wow.
So it's easy but we have to check how much, where it will go to the saturation and not, and that's where I'm looking forward to test with these instruments.
It sounds like you guys are getting a new reactor here.
Yeah.
So will you get to play a part in taking measurements over there?
We have got all the instruments, so anything I get a green signal, I'll be happy to go and start our work. And that's why it's good to do something with characterization with system we already know.
Right.
And then of course an unknown, it's easy to
then you have something to compare to in baseline.
Yes, compared to the baseline, and when we are confident of what we have here, and that's going, and the students are working hard on those projects.
Very good. Well, is there anything that we've missed that you'd like to talk to? Any projects that you were particularly fond of along your career path, or?
Yeah, of course, the most interesting project was the scintillator that was developed at the radiation monitoring devices. Now, of course, it's on the shelf now, but getting a scintillator which gives a very good gamma spectra, also measures the neutron, gives a thermal neutron peak around 3 MeV, which is very away from the rest of most of the gamma backgrounds that we see. That was, and getting to make the thing work into a detector system, like with different type of charge integration method, pulse shape discrimination, and other things to make this signal, make the detector work. That was very, very fascinating, and to understand how better we can get rejection ratio, resolution, and user-friendly to the customer. So that was good. Yeah.
And that was on radiation protection side and working with health physicists, right? So is that do you see that being kind of the future for technology, is just continue the push there?
Yes, of course, because we need more smaller system and flexible system. That's important. And like, for example, the detector or the Advocam-Pix that's in the market, and because they're capable, one device capable of doing many things. So that's important, because it's not only one radiation, right? All the radiations are around. So understand the dose from everything. That is a good step forward. Yes.
Very good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, we always like to end our podcasts with something hopeful for the future. So can you talk a little bit about where you hope things go here within the department at Georgia Tech, or within the nuclear community abroad?
Yeah, so finally nuclear community, of course, have woken up, and which is good thing. The nuclear power was almost got a little bit pushed under the carpet, so people are aware that this is the solution, and I'm sure the nuclear community, we always felt that this was the right solution, but now we have the support from the rest of the world and the rest of the people here. So that makes, gives you a double advantage of speaking out loud, and this is where we are going, and this should be the right direction. Use less electricity, understand where we need and how we can solve, and that's where the nuclear power plant will help us to reach, and everyone is working the best way to get it in a safe way, so that it reaches to the people, right, without taxing them lots for the money, and making them safe. The people who are working them, they are not getting radiation. So people, we are thinking about every aspect. It's not that there's a nuclear power plant, we get a lot of energy and that's all. So there are different aspects that we all are working to make our life better, and the next generation life better. Probably.
Very good. Yeah. Well, Dr. Sharmistha, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And initiate at least a new approach to the many difficult problems that must be solved in both private and public conversation if the world is to shake off the inertia imposed by fear and is to make positive progress toward peace.